Alright guys, this lesson is about percent of change. I'm going to do a real quick introduction to this. Let me read the TEAC over here if you'll read it along with me. You must be able to solve problems involving ratios, rates, and percents, which means we're going to be writing proportions to do that, including multi-step problems involving percent increase and percent decrease, and financial literacy problems. So we're going to start out easy and introduce the template that we're going to use, and then we're going to gradually get bigger, okay? It gets harder. Okay, so no big deal. Let's go ahead and get started. What is percent of change? Well, it's a ratio. If it's a ratio, that means you're writing. We're talking about two quantities. Let me turn on my marker here again. That means we're dealing with like two different quantities. They over be a ratio, and the change in an amount to the original amount expressed as a percent. If the new number is greater than the original amount, the percent is a change. The percent of change is a percent of increase. So, in other words, if I have $5 and at the end of the day I have $10, that's a percent increase. I can measure that. The opposite would be if the new number is less than the original number, then that would be a percent of decrease, which means I went from $10 to maybe to $8, a 20% decrease, and that's what that means there. So let's go ahead and look at the template here that we're going to be using. Before we do that, I forgot that we do have an algorithm. This is the process you should have copied in your interactive notebook. I'll introduce it again tomorrow, but basically you need to write a proportion from a problem, use that proportion to generate and solve an equation. You want to generate and solve an equation. And then we take the answer from your equation, whatever x is, and then we go back and interpret it and make sure that we completely answer the questions being asked. And we would do that by putting it back into a proportion. Alright, so let me see if I can get this to go right this time. Nope, I'm going backwards. So here's a template. I would expect you to copy it down this exact same way 100% of the time. There are point deductions if you don't have, like for example, percent signs on there. You don't have the quantity. The quantity could be money. It could be, animals, inches, doesn't matter, pounds. Any quantity, anything that can be measured would be considered a quantity. Okay, so keep going backwards. I wish there was a way to get this to go forward. Anyway, so let's talk about percent increase. If you have an amount that, for example, let's just say we start out at $10. I'm going to use that as an example. And at the end of the day, we have $15. That represents a percent increase because we started with $10. This is our starting point. That's what this is. This is what you really need to make sure you understand. Hey, anytime we have an original amount, a starting point before change, that represents 100% because you start with 100% and you either increase it or decrease it. We don't start at 0%, we start at 100. Okay, and so that would represent an increase, but at the same time you could also start with $10 like I mentioned, and you could decrease, you could lose some money, and at the end of the day you only have $8. Well, we could reflect that also as a percent decrease. Alright, and we would be solving for the unknown number here. So this is the template, this is your model that we're going to use to help us put the proportion, the numbers, because remember, the proportion you're giving three numbers, it's the fourth number that you need to solve for. So here's an example of a real problem that we need to be able to do at this level. So it says the total number of passengers on cruise ships increased 14% from 2010 to 2013. So that's an increase. They just told us, they said it's an increase. So I'm going to go ahead and write here the year, chronologically would be 2010, and it would have to be ending in 2013. Not only did they tell us that, they said it's a 14% increase, okay? So, hey, this is about passengers, okay? So I'll go ahead and fill this in. This is passengers, that's our quantity. And it's a 14% increase. Don't forget to put the percent sign. Now, if I add these together, 100 plus its increase, that's 114%. So right off the bat, I have two numbers. I need three, so I need one more number to put in this model to be able to generate that proportion. So the question is, if there were 20.98 million passengers in 2013, they're telling us to put this number has to be in 2013, so we're going to put it there. The question is, how many were there in 2010? That's this value here. So we know that there was an increase, and by the way, these represent passengers. This model is about passengers, and we're going to represent passengers as a quantity, as a number, and then as a percent as well. We already have the percent. It's 114%. That's the change. So let's go ahead and write a proportion. So the first thing you should do is use your proportion template, and it's going to be x over 100 on this side and 20.98 over 114 on this side. So 20.98 over 114. we're going to cross multiply and divide. So that's the algorithm. 114x is equal to 100 times 20.98. And last step is divide both sides by 114. That means that x is equal to, and we need to write this equation. This is the equation I'm looking for in terms of x. This would not be okay if you stopped right there. No, that's going to be a point deduction here. So let's do it right the first time. In our next lesson, we're going to be writing literal equations, and that means you have to. It's got to be in a specific variable. You can't just leave it like the way 114 over 114x. It has to be a specific variable. So let's go and do that now. Now it's at this point that you put your pencil down and you pick up your calculator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit alpha x, and I'm going to put 100 and in parentheses 20.98 on top and 114 on bottom. And I'm going to get my value. This is what appeared in my calculator screen. X is equal to 18.4 million. So 18.4 million are the number of passengers in 2010. And we'd like to know also, well, by how many passengers is that an increase of? Well, we could take 20.98. We'll take this amount and we're going to subtract this amount here. So if you could do that on your calculator. And the reason we're doing this is we want to be complete. So that means that's a decrease of 2.58 million passengers. Now I can answer any question that's being asked of me on this problem. I can tell you, the percent of the quantity in 2013, the number of passengers. In 2010, the decrease is both a number and a percent. Everything can be answered here. So the answer to this question is 18.4 million. There were 18.4 million passengers in 2010. Alright, so let's look at a different problem. This one's a percent decrease. And it says Tyrell has earned good grades in school. He qualifies for the good student discount on his car insurance. His monthly payment without the discount, which means that's the original starting point, that's this amount right here. This is what he's currently paying. That's without the discount, but we know a discount is 20%. That means it's going to be minus 20%. That's a decrease, so I'm going to put that here, minus 20%. So if I take 100 and subtract that, that means he's paying 80%. This is his new, write this here, because what does this represent? That's his new policy amount. His new policy amount is money would go here, but it's only 80% of his original amount. So our job is to find out what will he pay each month with the discount if he has this discount. So here's our model. So this is my unknown x. And by the way, this has to do, the quantity is money, so I'm going to put that in there. So this is about x over 80 is equal to 135 over 100. And we're going to cross multiply again. 100x is equal to 80 times 135. Divide both sides by 100. That means that the final equation is x equals to 80 times 135 divided by 100. I'm going to pick up my calculator just like you will, and I'm going to hit alpha x to open up the fraction key. 80 times 135 on top, close my parentheses, 100 on the bottom, looks right to my view, it's 108. So that means, I'm going to put that in here, it's a dollar amount, so it's $108. So that means that Tyrell is now paying $108. He was paying $135, and now that with a 20% discount, he's only paying 80%, which is 108. We can also take 135 and subtract 108 to get what's the dollar amount that he's actually discounted. That would be minus $27. So he's saving, I can tell you that he's saving $27 each month on his policy. Hey, so these are two types of percent increase and decrease. One is percent increase, one is a decrease. I wanted to show you the model. I want you to try to do this. I'll give you a copy of the model to glue in your interactive notebook tomorrow and Monday. But other than that, I hope you have a nice weekend. We'll see you in class. Thanks.